Okay, good morning. I want to walk through chapters 3 and 5, elements of form and principles of design. I'll try to cover them fairly briefly, about 20 minutes. Next time we meet, I want to cover chapters 6 and 7, that'd be photography and painting. That's next week. Then 2 weeks from now, we'll have our test. The test is going to cover in fact, the material that I'm presenting today and next week. The test will be about 30 questions. This information will be available to you as a recording in Zoom. It'll also be in the content section of Western Online. And if you have any questions, email me. You can call me. We're going to go forward. So today, let me show you on my screen the elements of design: line, shape, value, color, space, and texture. And we'll walk through them quickly, and then I'll present the principles of design. So line, it's the path of a plane. And if you look at these three examples, each artist has used line differently. This has a sense of elegance. The middle one is, I think, aggressive, maybe angry. And the third one is, I think, pretty dispassionate. So line is a tool that is used to express feeling, and it communicates same way as shape communicates. These are decisions, again, artists use. Look at the difference in line. The shapes here have a clarity. Here there's a blending of one shape into the other. And I think those decisions are in part how we respond to the work. Value, much in the same way, communicates, in this case, I think a very warlike, high contrast. The angles feel very different than the shapes in this image, but also the value contrast. So value would be the value contrast. Again, it's a tool that an artist can use. Color. Color is, I guess, complex. We could spend far more time with it. But if I look at these two images, the artists have used color differently. In the first one, Phyllis Bramson has used contrasting colors. You have green and red to maybe give a sense of conflict, of disharmony. And in this one, conversely, it has a sense of harmony to it in the shapes, but also in the color choices. And if I look at reflected light, pigment colors, so a blue light, for example, a blue paint would absorb all color and reflect blue. And if I look at this color wheel, we see that there are three primary colors. These colors cannot be created if you don't have red or yellow or blue. But in combination, they create these secondary colors. There's tertiary colors, etc. And when combined in equal amounts, it produces sort of a muddy color. By comparison, the colors from a monitor, in this case, the primary colors are red, green, and blue, and they produce white light when combined equally. So the white light on the monitor is red, not yellow, red, green, and blue at full intensity. In a monitor, we have just these three colors. And when they're displayed at different intensities and in fact, the pixels, the points of light are very close, and they blur, they blend in our eye and produce these, all the colors that we can see on the monitor. If we just simply multiply out the different intensities as red and green and blue, these will produce some 17 million colors. We also have, as an element of art, is space. And three-dimensional space is height, width, and depth. If we want to create that illusion of space on a flat surface, we have these indicators of space. And I'll walk through them quickly. We have overlapping, which creates a clear sense of which object is closest to us. Establishes proximity more clearly than the other indicators. So even though these pyramids are smaller because they're in front of this pyramid, in front of this pyramid, in front of this, we understand which one is closest and which is furthest away. If we have diminishing size, our mind interprets that as this object being closer to us. If these objects overlapped, then there'd be no doubt which one is closest. Atmospheric perspective is using value contrast, color intensity, increased detail to add to that illusion of depth. So there's overlapping, there's diminishing size, but there's also, in this front horse and rider, we have a higher value contrast from black to white. We have a more intense color and certainly more detail in this figure than these cattle in the background. And we perceive that's the background. Vertical placement also adds to this illusion of depth. As we go from the bottom to the top, we're going from objects that are closest to us to those furthest away. And as in all these cases, we're looking at not just, for example, a color in isolation, but we're seeing overlapping, we're seeing diminishing scale, etc., or diminishing proportion. But if we look at these two images, these bright, warm colors, the yellow, the flowers, the red sort of uniforms, they come forward. And the cool colors, the violets, the blues, the greens, they recede. So this is another tool artists can use to sort of add to that illusion of depth. And then we have the use of diagonals. A diagonal is perceived as coming forward or receding into the image. And using linear perspective, which is a sort of systematic organization of diagonals, we have first the horizon. And this is an important point. On the horizon is that vanishing point. And that will be one of the test questions, that the vanishing point goes on the horizon. If we look at the diagonals, they recede to that point. These lines and these lines are parallel to one another, perpendicular between the horizontal and vertical lines. But the other lines recede back to the vanishing point. That illusion of depth was discovered about 500-600 years ago. And it's sort of surprising it took that long to really create a system. If we look at texture, we have actual texture or implied texture. So, a painting or a sculpture or so the world around us is actual texture, or much like creating that illusion of depth, it can be simulated on a flat surface. And then very briefly, we have time and motion. Try to think of even the time it takes to walk around a sculpture and to regard it from different, in effect, we're viewing it in motion. Or in this case, we have a sculpture that moves, a kinetic sculpture. Film obviously uses time and motion as an integral part of the medium. Again, if you have questions, email me. I'm so sorry that I'm so clumsy with using um, Zoom that I'm still making my way forward. Principles of design. We have scale, proportion, unity, balance, direction, and emphasis. And these are, in effect, the organization of the elements that we just spoke of. So if we speak of scale, we're really not changing the line or shape, etc. But the scale in itself is a decision an artist needs to make, or a designer needs to make, and that decision very much impacts how we respond to the work. A very large work feels overwhelming, as a sense of wonderment maybe, and then a very small work has an intimacy. To look at a very small piece, we have to, be physically close to it, and that intimacy is very different than and appropriate to the different subjects or what the artist is trying to say about this subject. We have these similar to scale, which refers to the size of the artwork. Proportion refers to the relative size of objects or colors within the piece. So we're not looking at whether this is a 10-foot or 10-inch painting. We're looking at the relative size of the objects within it. So in proportion, we look at this first image, the artist is playing games, is unexpectedly putting large objects with I don't know, it's either a big bat or a little comb, or a big comb, or it's that sense of confusion, I think, is what the artist is trying to communicate. Over here, proportion is used to create a sense of the enormous distance between this figure and the house on the horizon. The relatively large, proportional use of this shape against this shape and against the field is part of the meaning, part of the way at least I respond to this piece. If we look at, let me skip to the next one, unity and variety. This is another tool, much like proportion or scale, the artist can use to change how we respond to the work. Here, Andy Warhol has taken a simple object, a Coke bottle, and repeated it. And it seems like he's speaking about the industrialized world or the mass-produced world around us. It's like it's a piece of music that is monotonous and intentionally so. If we look at this work by Grant Wood, we find some shapes repeat. The 3-tined fork is repeated almost exactly in his shirt and overalls. If we look at this is actually his sister, and I did meet her, by the way. If we look at this oval curvilinear shape is repeated in the trees, it's repeated in her brooch, in the top of her, I guess, dress. And so there's some elements that repeat, but it's not as repetitive as Warhol's. And artists certainly can create works that are certainly more varied, that create a far greater sense of conflict or excitement. So once again, this is a decision that the artist makes in trying to communicate ideas, thoughts, feelings. If we look at this piece, we can divide it in the center, and one half almost perfectly mirrors the other. And it feels like work like this is sort of removed from day-to-day life. It feels special somehow. Symmetrical balance has that quality. We see it in a lot of religious work. If we compare that to like this painting, it feels more casual, feels more like the world around us. So once again, this is the decision an artist makes, and they'll utilize balance, in fact, in combination with all the things we've spoken of, to communicate. Direction and emphasis. If we look at this painting, this is by Toulouse-Lautrec. The first thing that catches my eye, normally I'd expect to see an object in the center, or possibly at the top, as in our culture, we read from left to right, from top to bottom. But instead we see the largest face that's positioned over here. And the artist is using value contrast, using contrast of color, the orange and green. He's using intensity of color, proportion. All those things draw our attention first to her face. And I do think this is an image where he wants us to be surprised, and having, in effect, the object that commands our attention first, placed over here, communicates that. In graphic design, this is one of the most important decisions. If you have a poster, what do you want a person quickly, passing by and glancing at the poster? What should they see first? What should stand out? Again, this is the decision that a designer artist needs to make. This is unlike a piece of music where it's clear, or a film. What is meant to be seen in sequence. Here, that direction emphasis is a decision. And finally, we have these two works of art. The first is by Paul Revere. The second by Francisco Goya. And these are events that shaped their life. The first is, it's called the Boston Massacre. It occurred in 1770. It's one of the events that led to the American Revolution. So we have, in fact, British troops firing into this crowd of people. And we have these identifying buildings in the background. And in this work, we also have soldiers and their victims. And in the background, we have an identifying, the town. The difference is Goya has utilized the things we've just spoken of, and he's used them effectively. And he's created an artwork that, what do we see first? Is I see this person here. This person has about just a moment to live, because we look at literally sort of a before and after sort of, this person's literally at the last moment of their life. And I think he wants us to pay attention to the victims. And the soldiers here are not even acting as humans. We don't see their faces. We see just the repetition of their weapons and the figures themselves. The town is less important than the drama occurring in front. And so he has diminished its proportion and diminished its value contrast. In addition, this work is life-sized. So when you walk up to it, you really feel like you're sort of immersed. You feel far more that you're there than if you see this piece, which is relatively small. So it's almost like reading two accounts of the same event. One person has the ability to communicate effectively, draw you into the story, to make you care. And the other has the facts, but it's just not as compelling. So this is that summary I'd like to sort of end with. If you have questions, do contact me. Again, next week, rather than spend the time to review this, I'll make quick reference to it. If you have any questions about what will appear on the test, please ask. I'll answer very directly. I want you to do well. If I look at then the new material, we'll talk about that again fairly briefly. And then 2 weeks from now, we'll take that first test. So thank you, and Hope to see you soon. Oh, there's me. Talk to you later. Bye.